working groups and drafting groups that will take place today. First, during the lunchtime, 12:15 to 13:45, there is a working group on the application of Article 13 in the Lao PDR, which will take place in room 9. The drafting group on agenda item 33.1, Oceanic White-Tipped Shark, takes place in room 15, which is in the 3rd floor, floor level 3. The Finance and Budget Subcommittee takes place in room 12. There are also 4 logistical extra announcements. First, the National Annual Siren Test of Switzerland takes place today between the times of 13:30 and 15:30. So this afternoon, there's going to be the annual National Siren Test for emergencies. So you might hear a siren both in the building, outside of the building. If you have a Swiss mobile phone, I think the notification also goes there, but please don't be alarmed. This is the annual National Siren Test. We would also like to remind you to make sure that you are speaking on the correct agenda items. I think on the screen you can see that there's a band at the bottom of the screen where the agenda items will appear. So please make sure not to speak on the wrong agenda item. Also, when the chair calls on you to take the floor, please do not touch the button. It is the technician who will actually open the microphone for you. If you push the button, you actually end up turning off your microphone, so please make sure to do that. Lastly, today, at the end of the day, the chair is intending to review executive summaries, some 1 and some 2. So please make sure that you read them. They are published on the website in all 3 languages. So please make sure that you do read them when the chair finds time to review the executive summaries. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Secretariat. So I think we are ready to begin our morning. The first item on our agenda is document SC 78, document 65.4, domestic ivory markets, and I will turn to the Secretariat to introduce this document.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This document summarizes the progress made on the implementation of decisions on ivory seizures and domestic ivory markets and the closure of domestic ivory markets. Regarding the feasibility of an analysis of ivory seizures connected to each party with a legal domestic market for commercial trade in ivory, the Mike Ettis Technical Advisory Group and Secretariat concluded that it is not feasible. A main challenge remains clear criteria to identify parties with a legal domestic market for commercial trade that can be applied in a consistent manner. With respect to closing domestic ivory markets, the document's responses to notifications are summarized. The Standing Committee is invited to consider the recommendations in paragraph 28 of the document. Thank you.
So as you heard, we're considering the recommendations in paragraph 28 of the document, and I will open the floor to the Standing Committee members. I have Kenya.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, Kenya wishes to thank the Secretariat for preparing document 65.4 on domestic ivory markets. Madam Chair, since 2016, Resolution Conf 10.10 has urged parties that allow legal domestic trade in ivory to close those markets that contribute to poaching or illegal trade. This provision reinforces CITES provision on international commercial ivory trade by ensuring that national ivory trade policies support rather than undermine the international ivory trade ban. While many parties have closed their domestic ivory markets, some parties still allow domestic trade in ivory It is important to ensure that domestic ivory trade is not negatively impacting global efforts to improve enforcement. Madam Chair, because of this, we support the recommendation on 18 listed on the document, but disagree with the Secretariat recommendation on 65.4 that decisions 18.117 and 18.119 as revised at COP19 can be deleted. These decisions direct parties with the legal domestic ivory markets to report on measures they are taking to ensure that those markets are not contributing to poaching or illegal trade. We request that the Standing Committee recommend that COP20 renews these important decisions, so they should not be deleted. All other decisions, I think, we are supportive of them. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Kenya. That was very clear. I hope the other interventions will be as clear on what decisions and what you support. So I open it up to other Standing Committee members. Not seeing any requests, I look to observer parties. I have Israel.
Yes, very briefly, we agree with Kenya. They should not be deleted. Thank you.
I have the UK.
Thank you, Chair. The UK also agrees with Kenya and with the recommendation that the decisions 18.117 and 18.119 as renewed at COP19 should be proposed for renewal at COP20. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll call on Senegal.
Merci, Madame la...
Thank you, Madam Chair. You said that Kenya was clear. I will very briefly say that I support the Kenyan proposal. Thank you.
I call on Benin.
Merci, Madame.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Benin also supports the Secretariat recommendations, but supports Kenya on 117 and 119. Thank you.
Thank you. I call on the USA.
Thank you, Chair. The United States acknowledges the advice provided by the Mike and Edis Technical Advisory Group that an analysis of the relationship between ivory seizures and domestic ivory market and the inability to establish clear criteria to identify parties that would be subject to the analysis. We are disappointed no path forward is recommended. We note the suggestion made by a member of the subgroup in paragraph 20 of the document that the Standing Committee discuss alternatives. Based on the notification responses, we see a potential for future work on this subject if supported with external funding, and recommend that this be discussed in the Mike and Edis subgroup, including whether to update or delete decisions 19.99 to 19.101. We believe this approach would be more beneficial than discontinuing investigating the issue further. We also agree with Kenya to renew the decisions 18.117 to 18.119. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I call on Belgium.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning to everybody. From Belgium's perspective, on behalf of the EU and the Member States, we understand the concerns from Kenya, and we see that there's some support for requesting to maintain or to renew these decisions from COP18. We are, however, mindful of the reporting burden of parties, and we will probably all remember the slide at the beginning of this standing committee with the number of decisions just going up. So we kind of want to avoid renewing decisions without serious grounds for maintaining them. However, given the support mentioned in the room, if everyone feels that they should be renewed in the spirit of compromise, we can accept it. However, for the decisions made on the decisions from COP19, so decision 19.99 to 19.101, we agree with the Secretariat to delete them. Thank you.
Thank you. I have Niger.
Merci.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Niger supports Kenya on this matter. Thank you.
I call on Sudan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sudan support Kenya to renew the decisions 18.117, 18.119. Thank you.
Thank you. I open the floor now to observer organizations. I have IWMC.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The issue of domestic market and domestic trade is not an issue under the competence of CITES. We therefore recommend to the parties that they refrain from addressing those issues until such a time as the text of the convention has been amended to remove the word international from its title and its prerogative. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And forgive me, I've gotten, I now have it. The other NGO would be the Japan's Tiger and Elephant Fund.
Thank you, Chair. This statement is provided on behalf of JTEF, EIA, and the observer NGOs in the list that was submitted to the Secretariat in advance. We support the interventions from Kenya, Senegal, Benin, Niger, and the United States, and agree with party recommendations to renew decisions 18.117 to 119 Rep COP19. Japan's market stands out among those parties that permit some degree of commercial trade in ivory. Due to its large exemptions, Japan's regulatory framework in fact facilitates commercial trade in ivory. Japan has large stockpiles and thousands of government-authorized ivory traders. From this legal domestic market, ivory items have continually flowed illegally to other countries. We appreciate the efforts made to assess the feasibility of analysis of ivory seizures and domestic ivory market called for in Decision 19.99. As this type of information is helpful for parties to assess whether a party's legal domestic ivory market is contributing to poaching or illegal trade. We note the ETIS seizure data on a party level is now available to the public by the new ETIS data aggregate tool available on ETIS Online. In the case of Japan, the ETIS data clearly demonstrates that it is contributing to illegal international ivory trade. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I think I have a sense in the room. I will consult with the Secretariat on the way forward. Thank you. All right, I am looking particularly at the Standing Committee members to see if there's any support for what the U.S. suggested, which was to have some further discussion on the alternatives. Other than that, I didn't hear anyone else suggest that, so I would look if there's any support for that suggestion from the U.S. I see shaking heads. I've got Japan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The CITES mandate is to regulate international trade in endangered wild plant and animal species. Therefore, Japan is the view that the closure of domestic ivory market is not covered by the CITES mandate. In addition, Japan would like to point out the following 3 points. First, in Japan, ivory stockpiles that legally imported in the past is used. Border control and domestic trade are regulated by strict measures. Second, no evidence of involvement in large-scale illegal trade, especially in recent years. As a result, Japan is not included in the NIA process. Third, Japan contributes to the conservation of elephant through the support of MIC project. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm still looking for if there is any support from the Standing Committee on the U.S. suggestion. Otherwise, I think I'm ready to conclude this. All right, I'm being told the U.S. isn't suggesting as the North American region, but as the U.S., so it's not the Standing Committee. So I have Kenya to speak yet, and then I think I would like to wrap this up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I know the market subgroup already have a heavy workload, and there was a general consensus that these decisions will not be deleted. Madam Chair, also did not get clearly what Belgium proposed, because deleting decision 199 and 10 actually means again going against what we are proposing. So we are still maintaining that those two decisions should not be deleted as proposed by the Secretariat.
So, Kenya, based on what you just said, I guess I need a clarification, because it was my understanding from what I heard from some of the Standing Committee members and the parties that spoke, that they were not accepting the deletions of the decisions 18.117, 18.118, 18.119, but there seemed to be support for deletion of 19.99 to 19.101. So I guess I'm looking from the Standing Committee members if I've captured that sense correctly. Because I think on this intervention now you're suggesting we keep all those decisions, but in our initial debate, I did not hear that, I didn't get that sense. So I'm looking for, I would sum it up that what I've heard is that there was support to delete decisions 19.99 to 19.101 and to keep decisions 18.117 through 18.119 on the closure of the domestic ivory markets. And so if anyone wishes to speak to this to help the chair, that's sort of where I felt the discussion was going. All right, so I'll try to summarize. Basically, Based on the discussion heard, the Standing Committee agrees with the advice provided by the CITES Technical Advisory Group and the CITES Subgroup relating to the feasibility of the analysis proposed in Decision 19.99. Agrees that Decisions 19.99 to 19.101 on ivory seizures and domestic ivory markets have been implemented and can be deleted. Agrees to propose the renewal of Decisions 18.17, Rev Cup 19, 18.118, and 18.119, Rev Cup 19, on the closure of domestic ivory markets for consideration by COP 20. So I'm looking to the Standing Committee members if they agree with those those conclusions. I see some nods. I basically have the Standing Committee agreeing to that. All right, then we will move on to the next agenda item, 65.5, which is the exchange of information between the annual illegal trade report and the elephant trade information system. And I call on Belgium as the chair of that CITES subgroup to introduce the document. Of the intercessional CITES working group, sorry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. At SC77, a working group was set up to discuss the exchange of information between the annual illegal trade report and the elephant trade information system, CITES, with a mandate to potentially review provisions of paragraph 27J of the resolution on trade in elephant specimens and the provisions in paragraph 4 of the resolution on national reports. The working group worked through electronic means and held one online meeting to discuss the different elements. As you will have seen in the report, the working group proposes certain changes to both resolutions, as mentioned in the annex of Doc 65.5. Besides these issues, which conclude our mandate, if the Standing Committee obviously accepts them, there were other issues that were raised during the discussions. Our mandate, however, did not allow to dig deeper into these concerns, but we have listed them in paragraph 6 of the document, and we ask for the advice of the Standing Committee if and how these matters can be taken forward. One option could be the setup of a new intercessional working group with a mandate to tackle these issues. But obviously, this is up to the Standing Committee to decide. I look forward to the feedback of the room on these issues. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for the work that this working group did. I will now open the floor to Standing Committee members to speak on this issue. I have Japan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We would like to make a comment for recommendation B, as described in this document, that from the perspective of cost efficiency, maintaining two separate databases should be examined, and at least duplicating reporting must be avoided. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Any other Standing Committee member wishing to speak? I'll open up the floor then to observer parties. I have the EU.
The EU and its member states strongly support the proposed amendments to resolutions Conv 10.10 and 11.17 as reflected in Annex 1 of the document. These changes were agreed upon by consensus within the working group, and we consider them an important step toward improving the consistency of data reporting and exchange. At the same time, we recognize that several unresolved issues remain. These challenges outlined in paragraph 6 could not be fully addressed within the limited mandate of the working group. So we fully support further discussions on these matters, as ensuring clarity and efficiency in reporting processes is essential. We consider it crucial that we minimize the reporting burden on parties while promoting the exchange of data whenever it contributes to informed decision-making by the conference of the parties. Both the Elephant Trade Information System and the Annual Illegal Trade Report are key tools in monitoring and addressing illegal wildlife trade. Streamlining data submission and enhancing information exchange between these systems should remain a priority.
Thank you. I call on Kenya.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Kenya appreciates the work of the intersessional working group on this issue, and thanks Belgium as the chair of the working group for submitting this document. Madam Chair, Kenya supports the proposed amendments to Resolution 10.10 as revised at COP19 and Resolution COMP 11.7 again revised at COP19 to improve information sharing between the annual illegal trade report and CITES. On the issue of double reporting described in paragraph 6B of the document, in order to reduce the reporting burden on parties, we think that the solution should be to prioritize submission of Ivory Caesar data to CITES and ensure that this information can be easily copied over to the annual illegal trade report. Reporting CITES data involves including more detailed information, so this will be the priority for Ivory Caesars. If not, there is a risk that CITES analysis should suffer due to less detailed information submitted to the annual illegal trade reports on Ivory Caesars. I thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I have Niger.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Niger also supports the adoption of the proposed amendments to the resolutions CONF 1010 and 1117. With respect to the different deadlines for the submission of data on illegal trade, this matter was discussed at length at COP19. It was decided that the different deadlines should be maintained. We therefore do not think that this requires any further discussion by the Standing Committee. Thank you.
The floor is now open to observer parties, if any wishing to speak. I turn to observer organizations. I have World Wildlife Fund.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you to Belgium as chair of the subgroup for preparing this document. We would like to note that in the review of the NIAP programme presented in Doc 33.13.2, parties stressed the importance of near real-time data in shaping the implementations and updating of NIAPs. The parties further described a reliance on ETIS reports to provide needed information on dynamics of illegal ivory trade, despite its own time lag issues. Therefore, while we understand that the burden of reporting is prompting discussion of shifting the submission date of ETIS data to be the same as that for the AITR, it is essential to maintain ETIS data submission as 31 March to ensure best data informs most impacted parties, an issue already decided by the parties at COP19 and incorporated into the resolution. A feasible report, as Kenya has said, a feasible solution, I beg your pardon, as Kenya has said, to reduce the burden of reporting would be having ETIS data submitted to fulfill AITR reporting for the parties. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I call on the USA.
Thank you, Chair. The United States supports comments made by Niger.
And then I have IWMC.
IWMC believes allowing a well-regulated commercial trade in captive-bred elephants can help offset human-elephant conflict by giving local communities tangible benefits while reducing pressure on wild populations.
If you would look at the top of the screen at the banner, we are not on that agenda item yet. We are not on the trade of Asian elephants. We are on 65.5.
Apologies.
Thank you. Not seeing any further requests, I guess I would look to perhaps Belgium if they've have any suggestions based on the debate we heard before I sort of try to give my views.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I heard great support for the continuation of the working group. I think that is clear. I heard some doubts from certain parties on the discussion on the deadline, but I also heard a lot of support for discussing the entire suite of issues mentioned in paragraph 6. So based on that, I would suggest that the Standing Committee put forward a set of a draft decision to the COP to set up a working group to discuss all elements in paragraph 6. Thank you. If needed, I have prepared a draft decision that I can read out slowly, so the Standing Committee can consider this to be put forward to the COP for adoption.
Thank you. Your summary goes along with what I heard in summary, so I would ask you, I think it would be very helpful for you to read out the draft decision that would propose the work to discuss paragraph 6 continue intercessionally between the next COPs. So if you could read it out slowly so that everyone can follow, then I think we can, I'll summarize to conclude this document.
Thank you. So it is a decision directed to the Standing Committee, 20AA. The Standing Committee shall consider the matters as contained in paragraph 6 of document SC 78, doc 65.5 on exchange of information between the annual illegal trade report and the elephant trade information system, comma, and make recommendations as necessary, comma, to the 21st meeting of the Conference of the Parties. Thank you.
Thank you. That's very clear. I will now look to the Standing Committee for reactions to this additional decision. And I see the USA.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The United States will proposes amending the draft decision just outlined by Belgium to paragraph 6, B through G. We feel that recommendation A regarding the deadline was discussed at COP19 thoroughly, and the parties agreed to keep the reporting deadline as is.
Thank you. US, I think we did hear from some that the reporting deadline, I think we heard from Kenya on this, that this was adopted at COP19. So I look to see if others agree with the amendment to the decision proposed by the US and see if there's support for that. Not having any requests for the floor, I guess I'll try to sum up where I think we are on this particular item. So I think the Standing Committee, I have Poland.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just briefly to support the decision as read out by Belgium without the US amendment. Thank you very much.
I also have the UK.
Thank you, Chair. The UK would support the recommendation made by the US to not include A in the decision that goes forward. Thank you.
Okay, it would be helpful for me to hear from some other standing committee members now, because I think I'm sort of split. I think the US proposed deleting paragraph A from this decision. I think I heard Kenya say that early on, and then I also now heard support from the UK. And then I've heard two speak in favor of the original decision with keeping A in. So I'm sort of split. And so I looked for other standing committee members who may have some thoughts on this. Morocco?
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Thank you, Madam Chair. Morocco supports the proposals from Kenya and the USA.
Okay, I think I'll sum it up and see if this is where we land. So the Standing Committee agrees to the proposed amendments to paragraph 27G in Resolution Conf 10.10 Rev Cop 19 on the trade in elephant specimens and paragraph 4 in Resolution Conf 11.17 Rev Cop 19 on national reports presented in the annex to the present document for submission at the 20th meeting of the Conference of the Parties for consideration. And the Standing Committee takes notes of the matters contained in paragraph 6 of the present document and agrees to submit the following decisions for consideration at COP 20. Decision 20.AA, the Standing Committee shall consider the matters as contained in paragraph 6, subparagraphs B to G of document SC 78, document 65.5 on exchange of information between the annual illegal trade report and the elephant trade information system, and make recommendations as necessary to the 21st meeting of the Conference of the Parties. So that would delete paragraph 6A from this. So that's my summary of where I feel the support from the Standing Committee is right now, and I look for concurrence or any other views. Okay, I will take silence as acceptance of this, and there may be more discussion at the COP when the decision goes forward, but this is what Standing Committee will send. Thank you. So now we are on agenda item 65.6, Trade in Asian Elephants, Elephas Maximus, decision 19.108, Standing Committee document 65.6 again, and I will call on the Secretariat to introduce this document.
Thank you very much, Chair. The Secretariat in the document a report on the implementation of the decisions on trade in Asian elephants. The recommendations of the Secretariat for consideration by the committee are provided in paragraph 33. The committee is invited to note the information from parties regarding the implementation of decision 18.226 Rev Cop 19 and invite parties to draw upon it to strengthen controls, oversight and monitoring of Asian elephants. Further, the committee is invited to consider and endorse the list of key elements to be considered regarding registering, marking and tracking systems for captive Asian elephants presented in Annex 1 and encourage Asian elephant range states to draw upon it. Also, to request the Secretariat to monitor trade in Asian elephants and bring matters of concern to the attention of the committee. The committee is also invited to consider a draft decision in Annex 2 for submission to COP20, and lastly, to propose to COP20 that the decisions on trade in Asian elephants are already present in different resolutions or have been implemented and can be deleted. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I now open the floor to standing committee members wishing to speak on 65.6. I have Kenya.
Kenya thanks the Secretariat for preparing this document and notes that there are approximately 50,000 Asian elephants left, and according to document 65.1, they still face threats from poaching for their skin and meat. Under CITES decision 18.226 Rev COP 19 and 19.107 and 19.108 are the only provisions specifically aimed at protecting Asian elephants from trade threats. As such, these decisions should be safeguarded to ensure this vulnerable species is not forgotten by the CITES community. We recommend the Standing Committee to propose to COP20 the renewal of decisions 18.22, 19.17 and 19.108 with amendments put forward. Thank you.
I will now open the floor to observer parties. I have the USA.
Thank you, Chair. The United States thanks the Secretariat for its work in implementing these relevant decisions. With regard to Recommendation A, the United States supports noting the responses to the notification and inviting parties to draw upon the information provided in those responses to explore opportunities to further strengthen controls, oversight, and monitoring of Asian elephants. Regarding Recommendation B, in addition to the recommended elements, the United States recommends adding an element that such parties consult with the Secretariat to ensure that their party profiles in CITES Lex are up to date. And also, we believe that the guidance should point to additional relevant resources, such as a guide to the application of CITES source codes to ensure consistent application of terms and definitions. With regard to the recommended elements under the elephant identification document found in Annex 1, paragraph 3, we recommend a couple of additions. Under parentage, we recommend that if parentage is unknown, then the individual is assumed to have been conceived in the wild and is classified as F1. Under detailed description of any unique identifying characteristics, we believe that there should be the inclusion of text to the effect of include fixed morphological traits of tusk and ear types. And then concerning photos of the animal, we believe that it should also include photographs of fixed morphological traits of tusks and ears, as well as front, back, right, and left profile photos. With regard to Recommendation C, we support requesting the Secretariat to monitor trade in Asian elephants and bringing matters of concern to the attention of the Standing Committee. With regard to recommendation D, With regard to recommendation D in the draft decision 20.AA, we believe that the term should be bred in captivity, so it would be Asian elephant bred in captivity rather than using the term captive bred. And finally, with regard to recommendation E, we support recommending that the decisions be deleted as they have been implemented or included in relevant resolutions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I call on Thailand.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We would like to echo our support to the Secretariat recommendation that the requirement regarding the trade of Asian elephant is already present in Red Content 10, and this existing framework already provide guidance for monitoring trade and strengthening the enforcement. Therefore, Thailand support the deletion of the decision proposed in the document. Thank you, Chair.
I call on India.
Thank you, Chair. India notes the responses of the Asian elephant range tail to explore opportunities to strengthen controls, oversight and monitoring of Asian elephants, including those in international trade. India supports the recommendation at DOC 65.6 para 33 and also regarding key elements to be considered regarding registering, marking and tracing systems for captive Asian elephants as presented in Annexure 1. Thank you, Chair.
I call on Nigeria.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Nigeria would like to encourage parties affected by illegal trade in Asian elephant specimens to scale up activities to address illegal online trade, and including by drawing upon the support available through Interpol, the wildlife crime linked to the internet, practical guidelines for law enforcement practitioners, and as appropriate, reviewing the implementation of the provisions under regarding wildlife crime linked to the internet in Resolution Conf 11.3. Thank you.
I have Senegal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senegal notes with satisfaction the report provided by the Secretariat and supports the statement made by Kenya on the document. Thank you.
Thank you. I am now opening the floor to observer organizations. I have EIA UK.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We are speaking on behalf of EIA and 14 organisations whose names have been submitted to the Secretariat. EIA supports the interventions made by Kenya and Senegal. We do not believe it is possible to consider Decision 18.226 RevCop 19, subparagraph A, as fully implemented. Reporting rates have been consistently low, for example, with only 3 parties submitting reports to the present meeting. The IUCN Asian Elephant Specialist Group concludes in document 65.1 that in addition to habitat loss and human-elephant conflict, poaching and transboundary illegal trade in skin and meat continues to be a key threat to Asian elephants. In the past year alone, 42 Asian elephants were poached across 6 range countries, and EIA's recent research has found a thriving illegal online trade in Asian elephant parts and derivatives, in particular skins. The trade in Asian elephant skin trade was flagged by CITES parties at COP18 as an emerging threat to the species, and yet since then, the incomplete implementation of Decision 18.226 has resulted in a paucity of information which is hampering any analysis of the current scope and scale of this threat. Parties should be aware that there has never been a comprehensive discussion of Asian elephants at a CITES meeting. We would therefore urge the Standing Committee to reconsider this agenda item and renew, at the very least, Decision 18.226, subparagraph A, which would be in line with the precautionary principle. Should this meeting recommend the deletion of these decisions, it should consider at the next COP to amend Resolution Conf 1010 to make provision for time-bound reporting on Asian elephants, similar to the reporting requirement in Resolution Conf 9.14 on rhinos. Thank you.
Thank you. And lastly, I have IWMC.
IWMC believes allowing a well-regulated commercial trade in captive-bred elephants can help offset human-elephant conflict by giving local communities tangible benefits while reducing pressure on wild populations. We commend the Secretariat's efforts to address illegal trade and strengthen captive breeding controls. However, we urge the Standing Committee to place stronger emphasis on mitigating human-elephant conflict while promoting sustainable livelihoods. Responsible trade in captive-bred elephants can advance poverty reduction, foster improved husbandry, and strengthen conservation by involving communities in real solutions. Many range states also require technical and financial assistance to implement DNA profiling, registration, and marking systems effectively. IWMC encourages CITES to support these efforts so regulations do not become unduly burdensome or discourage local participation. By valuing elephants as a renewable resource under robust safeguards, both local populations and the species' long-term survival can benefit. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. So what I've heard so far is that there seems to be some support for deletion of the decisions, and then there are others who have spoken up to keep the decisions, more support for keeping. And also the U.S. has suggested amendments to paragraph B. I haven't heard anyone speak against those suggestions, so that's where I am, but I have also not heard from many Standing Committee members, so I look to see where the Standing Committee still wants to proceed on this issue, and I see the UK.
Thank you, Chair. If you listen to the discussions and given the ongoing threats faced by Asian elephants from illegal trade, we'd agree with the comments made by Kenya and others that there would be merit in renewing some of the decisions, in particular decision 18.226, Rev COP 19, subparagraph A. We don't think this is something that should be allowed to drop off. We recognise it's in the resolution, but we think it is such an important issue that there should be some decision going forward or recommended for the next COP. Thank you.
Since this issue is trade in Asian elephants, I look at the Asian representatives on the Standing Committee for any thoughts and insights that they may have. Sorry to put you on the spot, but it is an issue. Perhaps you've had some regional discussions on this, particularly on the decisions whether to keep them. We've heard keeping all of them. We've also heard keeping some of them. So I look for some thoughts. Also open the floor again. Observer parties can speak, looking for any. I've heard Thailand as an Asian range state, but I haven't heard from others. I have Israel wishing to speak, but before I give you the floor, I guess in particular, since some of the interventions happened before the U.S. spoke or after, I am still looking for views not only on the decisions, but on the suggested amendments to paragraph B by the U.S., because I heard others say Thailand, India, and Japan supporting paragraph B as it was. So I'm looking for some further thoughts. So, Israel?
Thank you, Chair. Just briefly, we support Kenya, UK, and others who want to retain 226, and we support the amendments by United States to subparagraph B and the other amendments by the USA.
Thank you. Any other standing committee views on this, or observer parties, particular range states? I have Kuwait.
Co-chair will support the comment by India. Thank you.
I will take some time to consult with the Secretariat and see if I can propose a way forward. All right, to be fair, and the chair is struggling with this one in terms of the views, could I ask the U.S. to repeat specifically their suggested changes to the elements in B?
Thank you, Chair. With regard to recommendation B from the United States, our suggestion was, in addition to the recommended elements that are there, we suggest that parties consult with the Secretariat to ensure that their party profiles in CITES Lex are up to date to reflect their national legislation and regulations. And then an additional resource that we thought would be useful to include in this list is a guide to the application of CITES source codes, and that would be intended to help ensure consistent application of terms and definitions. So just those two minor additions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So, and during the discussion, we heard India supported, as is, followed by Kuwait. And so I've got I'm looking now that the U.S. has clarified what their additions are to the elements. I hear that everyone is willing to accept what's already there. Now I seek some further views and discussions, and I know I'm taking up time here, on the additional elements. So if I could specifically have standing committee members' reactions to these additional elements that the U.S. has proposed to paragraph B. So I've been instructed to sort of refine what views I'm looking for. I guess I'm looking for any views that do not support what the U.S. has just suggested be added to B. And if I have what the U.S. said right, I think they've sort of refined from their original suggestions to a smaller list. Particularly the source code element, using that being added. I've got India and then I have Senegal, and I hope we can wrap this up.
Thank you, Chair. What we could capture from the representative from US in their first intervention was to include probably the parentage. If the calf born is unknown, then it will be construed to be from the wild. That's what we could capture from their initial statement. But I think this second statement had slightly changed in terms of national legislations and probably the source codes. So I think it's better that we sit with the US and see what are the textual changes we will or they would like to incorporate before we finalize this document. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, I have Senegal yet, and then the U.S., and then I'm wrapping this up. But I've heard the helpful suggestion from India. I have Senegal.
Merci, Madame.
Thank you, Madam. I think this is important for traceability. So I think the U.S. amendment is helpful and constructive, and we would support it as it would help with traceability. Thank you.
Lastly, I have the U.S. again.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you also to our colleague from India for pointing out the additional elements that we had included in our initial interventions. So the intention there was to simply add specificity with regard to the elements considered under the elephant identification document. So, for example, in the document in Annex 1, it simply says parentage, and so as noted, our suggestion was to add there clarifying language that if the parentage is unknown, then the individual is assumed to have been conceived in the wild and classified as F1. So we had simply intended to add additional specificity there and would be happy to work with India or others to clarify that language if the committee would like. Thank you, Chair.
I look to the committee if they would allow India and the U.S. to work on these amendments to the elements to see if they are. Otherwise, basically we have, I'm seeing agreement from the Standing Committee on the elements as is, and hopefully India and the United States might be able to add some better clarity to those elements. Is that an acceptable way forward? It's a very small drafting group of India, the U.S., but I would like a Standing Committee member in that, so would Kuwait be happy to work with those two parties? Seeing a thumbs up, just so I'm hopefully following the rules here. Okay, so then let me try to take a minute, and then I'll try to summarize this up, and apologies for taking so much time on this one, but I do think it is important. So right now, the Standing Committee is agreeing to paragraph A. B will need a little work, but they can agree on subparagraph C. Paragraph subparagraph D, to submit the draft decision 20AA as presented in Annex 2. Agree to paragraph E, recommend to propose to COP20 the renewal of decision 18.226, subparagraph A, on the trade in Asian elephants, and agree that decisions 19.107 and 19.108 have been implemented and can be posed for deletion at COP20. So that's where I sort of summarize where we are, and the only thing left would be little paragraph B with the elements. So is that acceptable to the Standing Committee members? I'm not seeing anybody opposing. I'm seeing nods. Oh, I have the USA.
Thank you, Chair. With apologies, with regard to recommendation D, our suggestion had simply been to correct the language so that it read sort of CITES standard language. So it currently reads as captive bred Asian elephant, and we had suggested that that be changed to Asian elephant bred in captivity to reflect the CITES standard language. Thank you, Chair.
Secretariat is saying that is consistent, but I need the Standing Committee to agree to that change in the title. I'm seeing nodding heads. Okay, then we will conclude this and come back at some point to paragraph B. And sorry for taking the time. I'll try to make up for some of it. Document 65.7 is the next agenda item, Trade in Mammoth Ivory, Decision 19.103, and I give the floor to the Secretariat.
Thank you, Chair. The Secretariat reports in a document on the implementation of the decisions on trade in mammoth ivory. The document provides background information and elaborates on the work conducted. The Secretariat has required used available information and research studies to compile information relating to the potential contribution of mammoth ivory trade to illegal trade in elephant ivory and elephant poaching. The recommendations of the Secretariat for consideration by the Committee are provided in paragraph 40 of the document. These relate to noting information in the document, to parties exporting and importing mammoth ivory, to parties where domestic ivory markets exist, and it proposes that the deletion of the decisions can be proposed to COP20. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I draw the Standing Committee and others' attention to the recommendations contained in paragraph 40 of the document and open the floor to the Standing Committee, and I have Israel.
Thank you, Chair. Israel thanks the Secretariat for conducting the study, and we support the recommendations in paragraph 40, but we have one small addition which we would wish to explain. At COP18, Israel introduced the very unusual proposal to list the woolly mammoth in Appendix 2, despite the species being extinct for thousands of years. The purpose of the proposal was obviously not to save woolly mammoths, but to help regulate trade in African elephant specimens. We strongly disagree with the Secretariat's conclusions in paragraphs 5 and 6 of this document, which state that listing in an extinct species falls outside the mandate of CITES. First, we have a clear legal opinion confirming that it is not outside CITES' mandate. And second, it is the responsibility of the parties and not the Secretariat to define the scope of the Convention's mandate. While a few parties felt it was outside the scope, most parties agreed that it was an acceptable proposal. We agree with the conclusions in paragraph 36, which suggests that while promoting mammoth ivory trade might help reduce elephant poaching, there are studies that warn that this trade may also drive increased demand for elephant ivory. We also wish to remind the meeting that promoting mammoth ivory as a substitute for elephant ivory is probably contrary to Resolution 17.4 on demand reduction. As we said, we support the recommendations in paragraph 40, but we have a small addition to the first subparagraph A. at the end of the sentence right now reads, takes note of the information and research compiled regarding the trade in mammoth ivory as presented in the present document. We would add this short sentence, noting, however, that listing extinct species in the appendices may be acceptable when such a listing would benefit CITES listed species. I'll read that again. And noting, however, that listing extinct species in the appendices may be acceptable when such a listing would benefit CITES listed species. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I open the floor to Honduras.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a matter of some concern to us, and we do not think that extinct species should be appendix listed. This could actually complicate the implementation of the convention, and it could well encourage the listing of other extinct species. I understand that there are concerns with respect to the ivory market. It could be that mammoth ivory would have a fleeting effect on the ivory market. Thank you, Madam.
I have Belgium.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We support the recommendations A, B, and D from the CITES Secretariat, and we agree that the decisions can be deleted and this discussion be closed. We're mindful, again, of the large number of decisions, so we propose to delete recommendation C, as we feel that this is already covered by the existing recommendations in Resolution Conf 10.10, Ref COP 19. In regards to Israel's request to amend recommendation A, we oppose the insertion of this additional sentence, and we echo Honduras' concerns on this matter. Thank you.
Thank you. I have Kuwait.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to support the statement made by Belgium just now. Thank you.
I will now open the floor. I have New Zealand, followed by Switzerland, and I have not opened the floor yet to observer parties. So Zimbabwe, I know you're wishing to speak. I'll call on you first when we get to observer parties. But for now, Standing Committee members, I have New Zealand and Switzerland and then Kenya. So New Zealand.
Thank you. We would like to align ourselves with Belgium and others supporting Belgium.
Thank you, Switzerland, and I'm looking for short where you fall out. Switzerland.
Thank you, Chair. Switzerland echoes Honduras and Belgium. Thank you.
I turn to Kenya.
Thank you, Chair. We listened carefully the comments and the revisions that were done by Israel, and we want to align to Israel's comments.
Thank you. I will now open the floor to observer parties, and I have Zimbabwe followed by, we'll see who follows. Zimbabwe.
Thank you, Chair. Zimbabwe agrees with the recommendations on paragraph 40, and we also share the same sentiments expressed by Honduras and Belgium. We do not agree with the submissions made by Israel. Madam Chair, as much as we understand the context to which we made the decision around the woolly mammoth proposal submitted by Israel, I think it is a precedence that we would not want to sustain, as we do not know where that will take us to when we start to be making consideration on extinct species. And in the African Elephant Action Plan, Madam Chair, we do not have any evidence or reference to the sentiments expressed by Israel. I think the African elephants have got other measures that we need to be prioritizing. Otherwise, this issue will just confuse the priorities that we already agreed to as African elephant range states. Thank you.
Thank you. I will call on some other parties, that, particularly those that have mammoths. So I don't want a lengthy debate on this one because I'm getting a sense from the Standing Committee interventions where we're falling out on this. So I will give the floor to the Russian Federation.
Thank you, Madam. We regret to note that the document prepared by the Secretariat contains misleading information regarding procedures, law enforcement practice, and the actual situation with mammoth ivory in the Russian Federation. Since 2023, mammoth ivory as such has not been exported from Russia. The exception is made when mammoth ivory is a part of a paleontological collection that has cultural significance. In addition, the process of collection of mammoth ivory is a licensed activity both at the stage of planning and subsequent export operations. Planning includes carrying out assessments of collection methods as well as of potential impacts on the environment. Illegal collection of mammoth tusks is prosecuted in accordance with criminal law, resulting in severe penalties. The export of paleontological collection materials is strictly regulated through licensing at both federal and regional levels. The sources of information cited in the document are not official, reliable, or up-to-date. They do not contain unequivocal facts and do not provide concrete evidence of mammoth ivory collection. For example, even the licensing authority for the export of mammoth ivory in the Russian Federation is indicated incorrectly. Such licensing is carried out by a different governmental body from the one specified in the document. Among sources, we would like to particularly highlight the article by Cox and Hauser from 2019. The information contained therein and cited in paragraph 34 does not correspond to the reality. In addition, the subject of this publication does not speak to the CITES mandate. We stress that Secretariat's reports should be based on verifiable sources. The Russian Federation stands ready to provide all necessary information. In light of this, we request deletion of incorrect information from the text. We also disagree with the recommendation 40A and request that this be reflected in the summary of the discussion. And we would also like to express our disagreement with the proposal just made by Israel with regard to 40A. Listing extinct species is not in line with the mandate of the convention, and legally this would be similar to, let's say, listing dinosaurs. Thank you.
Thank you. I call on Canada.
To be brief, Madam Chair, we thank the Secretariat for this report. We agree with the recommendations that were provided in the document, and like the many Standing Committee members who spoke, we do not support the addition proposed by Israel. Thank you, Chair.
I have China, and I'll ask parties to be brief. Just give me a sense of where you are.
Thank you, Madam Chair. China cannot support the proposed additions as made by Israel and supported by Kenya. CITES has already agreed not to list species that are considered extinct. We should not set a dangerous precedent. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Benin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We support Israel like Kenya, and we oppose the Belgian proposal with respect to recommendation C. Paragraph 19 does show that there are close similarities between mammoth ivory and elephant ivory and give examples of trafficking of both. So if there should be any threat to any species already under threat, we should do what we can to protect it. Thank you.
I'll open the floor to 1 or 2 interventions by observer organizations, but I ask them to really be brief and keep it to a minute. And then I would like to conclude this one because I do feel I have a sense of what the Standing Committee is going for. Thank you. I have the Animal Alliance for Canada.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We appreciate the report provided by the Secretariat, but we do not accept the conclusion that an extinct species cannot be added to the appendices. In fact, this may have already happened with the white-eyed river martin Pseudocalodon sirentari, which was almost certainly extinct when it was listed in 1987. We believe that as long as a case can be made that listing the mammoth could have a positive effect on the control of illegal trade in ivory, listing is appropriate and justifiable under the Convention. We also dispute the conclusion that there's no conservation benefit to listing the species. The Secretariat's document itself demonstrates that there's no clear consensus on the effect such a listing may have, in particular on the effect that a diminished supply of mammoth ivory could stimulate further poaching. In fact, the situation seems to be not much different from that at the time Israel submitted its original proposal, and we urge the Standing Committee to reject the Secretariat's recommendation that decisions 19.102 and 19.103 can be deleted. Thank you, Chair.
I call on IWMC, and then I will conclude this discussion.
The speaker has no microphone.
I've been instructed, I concluded it. I thought, so basically I apologize to IWMC and Wood Products who are asking, but I do see a Standing Committee member wishing to speak, so I will call on Israel, but I ask you to be very brief.
Thank you, Chair. In light of the discussion, we'll make your life easy and we'll withdraw our request to amend A. There's no listing proposal here that actually has to be discussed. There are precedents, and if another listing proposal comes up, that would be the time to discuss the legality of such a listing proposal. We do note, as was mentioned by others, that there is a precedent in CITES for listing extinct species, but we won't get into that here. Other than that, we would recommend that the Standing Committee accept the recommendations A through D as they are in the document from the Secretariat. Thank you.
Okay, this is how I am summarizing it. The Standing Committee agrees to subparagraphs A, B, and D. I heard Belgium wanting to delete C, and I had much support from Standing Committee members in support of deleting paragraph C when they aligned with Belgium. So, the Standing Committee agrees subparagraphs A, B, and D in paragraph 40, and note the intervention by the Russian Federation that will be recorded in the summary record. And so that's my conclusions on this one. I look for the Standing Committee members to agree with that conclusion. So I I see nodding heads, and so we can conclude this item and move on to the next agenda item. Next agenda item is 65.8, the CITES Dialogue Meeting for African Elephant Range States, Decision 19.167. And I, as the chair of that dialogue meeting, will introduce the document. I am pleased as Standing Committee Chair to present this document, which provides the communique and its outcomes from the African Dialogue meeting held in September in Botswana. Again, heartfelt thanks to the host country and to the African Elephant Range States participants for a constructive and forward-thinking meeting. At the dialogue meeting, the African Elephant Range States agreed on a text for a proposal to amend annotation A10 as requested by the decision of the COP. Botswana offered to submit an amendment proposal relating to annotation A10 as contained in the communique and called upon other range states to be co-proponents for that proposal. I do not intend here to have any discussion on this issue, and I invite parties and observer organizations to consult with Botswana if they have any substantive comments on that matter, A10. The range states further agreed on a set of draft decisions on sustainable financing for elephant conservation to be submitted for the consideration of the Conference of the Parties. The draft decisions, as agreed by the African Elephant Range States present at the dialogue meeting, are contained in Annex 3 to the communique. The Secretariat has suggested to the draft decisions be edited as set out in Annex 1 to the present document for clarity, not changing substance. So we'll be looking at Annex 1, and that's the Standing Committee is invited to consider here these draft decisions for submission to COP20. I want to open discussion on these draft decisions, but before doing so, I would call on Botswana as one of the vice chairs of the dialogue meeting to add any observations here. So I give the floor to Botswana.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity, Chair. Botswana hosted the African Elephant Dialogue meeting, which was attended by 31 out of the 37 African Elephant Range States in Maun, Botswana, on the 23rd to the 26th September 2024. We wish to express our appreciation to the Chair of the Standing Committee, the CITES Secretariat, all donors, IUCN African Elephant Specialist Group, and the African Elephant Fund Secretariat for the support provided to ensure a very successful meeting. The outcomes of the meeting were agreed to by consensus and reflect the desire by African Elephant Range States to work together to conserve and manage our elephants. One of the key outcomes of the meeting was an agreed text on decisions regarding the pressing need to mobilize sustainable financing for elephant conservation and management. Chair, we take note of and are in support of the recommendations and draft decisions contained in Annex 1 in SC 78 Doc 65.8. We are, however, not in support of any substantive changes to the text as proposed in SC 78 Inf Doc 28. We are of the view that it would be inappropriate to reopen this matter, particularly since many elephant range states are not represented here in this meeting. Our engagement in the lead-up to the technical workshop proposed will provide ample opportunity to finalize the agenda. In addition, in the spirit of the consensus reached in Maun, we look forward to continuing to deliberate on elephant-related matters at the upcoming meeting convened under the auspices of the African Union Commission and encourage elephant range states to raise any matters in this forum. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I will now open the floor to Standing Committee members. And again, we are looking at the draft decisions only in this plenary discussion. I'm looking for Standing Committee members first. Benin, I'll get back to you. I haven't opened the floor yet to observer parties. I have Belgium.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Apologies. We welcome the outcome of the African Elephant Dialogue meeting and fully support these outcomes. We look forward to seeing a joint submission to COP20 for the changes to the African elephant annotation. We also support the suggested amendments to the set of decisions related to sustainable financing, whilst reminding everyone of the existing African Elephant Fund, which is specifically created to support the implementation of the African Elephant Action Plan adopted and reviewed by all African elephant range states. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other standing committee members wishing to speak? I will open the floor to observer parties, and I have Benin.
Madame la Présidente.
Madam Chair, Benin would like to thank Botswana and the Secretariat for having organized this significant meeting, and unfortunately Benin was not able to participate. Whilst we identified with the conclusions that the participants came to, and we would like to make some amendments to 20AA, we'd like to remove the word "the chair of the" in the first line where there's a reference to the Standing Committee, and then in paragraph B that the technical workshop on the we'd like to change the information, we'd like it to say that we refer to the conservation and management of elephant and ivory stockpiles in accordance with the title, and that the other means would be non-commercial. In the decision 20CC and BB, we would like them to align in accordance with the amendments made to decision 20AA, and we hope that the Standing Committee will set up the list of requirements, and in the decision A10 for the amendment to annotation A10 and rationalizing paragraph F could create an ambiguity, because we are not clear on whether ivory sculptures from Zimbabwe would still continue to be non-commercial. So we would like to look at that. In the proposal to amend paragraph B on the trade in live animals, since no change has been proposed to resolution Conf 1120 Rev COP 18, the decision of destinations for range states, we see that the last sentence saying that specimens are listed in Appendix 1 and trade is, as a consequence, regulated. And also when we're talking about raw ivory, we cannot use that to authorize the export of live animals. Thank you.
Excuse me, Benin, we're not discussing the annotation A10. I know some of your comments were on that. I ask you to provide those comments to Botswana as they consider the proposal, but I would want our plenary debate to focus on Annex 1, on the decisions before us. So I've noted some of the changes you made to the actual decisions, but we will not record the comments you made on A10. Thank you. I have Zimbabwe.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and we really appreciate your efforts and even the efforts that you made for this dialogue meeting to be a success that we believe it is. Madam Chair, we agree with the draft decisions in Annex 1, and we do not agree to the amendments proposed by Benin as far as the draft decisions are concerned, because we discussed this, Madam Chair, as you are aware, extensively last year in Botswana, and we managed to reach a consensus in terms of the wording that appears there in the unamended form of the draft decision. So the proposals being put forward by Benin will take us several steps back on the progress that we managed to reach this far. Thank you.
Thank you, Zimbabwe. I have many countries now asking to speak. I will ask you to be brief, and basically what's before us is we have the decisions that have come out of the dialogue meeting that were agreed to by 31 African range states, and I would also ask the parties that are speaking, if you were part of the dialogue meeting, you had accepted those decisions there as consensus. Positions may change, but I would like to point that out. And I would also ask you to speak to then, do you support the amendments by Benin? So that's really what's before us. But I also am looking for more views from standing committee members. So I will give the floor to Kenya as a standing committee member, and then I will try to work my way through the African range states here that are asking to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, Kenya was part of the dialogue meeting, and we want to thank your leadership and the range states that attended the dialogue meeting. And we also appreciate the excellent hosting by the government of Botswana. Madam Chair, we have listened to the proposed amendments by Benin, which is also an elephant range state, and we don't find them to be substantive, making any substantive change to the consensus that was developed in Botswana. We find that what they are proposing is bringing clarity to the proposed decisions, particularly when it comes to the issue of sustainable financing, and also bringing the issue of organizing the African dialogue meeting under the oversight of the Standing Committee. The African Elephant Dialogue meeting is for the African range states, and we should dictate who attends it, and we should dictate when we need closed meetings and when we need experts, individual experts, donors. It should be in consultation with the range states. We should not allow it to be dictated by the Secretariat. I think the proposal that is being brought out by Benin when it comes to sustainable financing, let's have it under the armpit, and let's just look at it. It's not a substantive change. Is proposing things that can be done and amended. If there's a call as proposed by Botswana that we discuss this during our forthcoming regional meeting, then I'll request that the Standing Committee throws back to the African range states to look at those amendments at the regional meeting and possibly before submission, but we should not just say it was closed, there was a consensus, we are not opening up the document. That's being unfair to the 6 or more parties that did not attend the dialogue. So, Madam Chair, just to be brief, we do support the amendments made by Benin in terms of allowing observers to the financing meeting. I think it should be in consultation with the range states. Yeah, it should not just be open to observers, but we'll identify their relevance and say, yes, we can admit that. But not leave it to somebody to decide it is this and this. It is us to say who we want in that meeting. And if we decide to close the dialogue, we'll close it as African range states. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Kenya. I have several parties, African range states now wishing to speak, but I have Madagascar, who was also a vice chair of the meeting, so I will give the floor to Madagascar.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
I would like to congratulate the Secretariat and the Standing Committee for having organized this dialogue meeting on African elephant. We also congratulate the range states of African elephant for having reached a consensus on the various points linked to African elephant. However, Kenya has just said that it is not a document that is set in stone, that we could maybe continue the discussion and dialogue amongst the various range states. So we support the continuation of the dialogue amongst range states, and we would also like to build on what we have achieved. This is at a stage, and we can improve, and we have planned for that during the dialogue. Thank you.
I call on the GRC.
Merci.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for giving me the floor. We would like to speak on behalf of Central Africa and saying that Central Africa is amongst the range states, and we'd like to congratulate the Secretariat for the holding of the meeting, and Botswana. And we welcome the consensus reached following long debate at Maun. But we would like to highlight an important element, which is that the fact that the consensus that was reached and came out of the range states and the work with the Secretariat and the organizations that support the elephant plan, we think that is already a very positive element when it comes to the dialogue. And we think that it's not so much extending the debates, but ensuring that we continue to allow range states to continue with their discussions. Thank you.
Thank you. I have one more Standing Committee member wishing to speak, and then I will consult with the Secretariat before opening up the floor to observer parties, which I have a large number of. USA?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Speaking on the behalf of the United States supports the recommendations of the African elephant range state as outlined in document SC78, Doc 65.8. We welcome the communique of the dialogue meeting and submission of the draft decisions on sustainable financing contained in the annex. We thank Botswana for hosting the dialogue and Cote d'Ivoire for serving as vice chair of the meeting, the participating African elephant range states, and the Secretariat for organizing the meeting. The United States wished to provide 2 edits for consideration by the African elephant range states regarding the draft decisions. Regarding Annex 1, the one on sustainable financing, draft decision 20AA in paragraph A, we are suggesting for consideration to add the text, taking into consideration COP19 INF Doc 14, the May 2023 Commission paper mobilizing sustainable finance for African elephant conservation, and any work done under Decision 18.9 to reflect previous progress made on the topic. And also for consideration in Draft Decision 20AA, paragraph B, the United States is providing for consideration adding the text, potential donor parties and relevant financial institutions, as we feel this may be an appropriate time to invite relevant funders to participate in the important discussion if the African elephant range states agree that it is appropriate. Thank you.
I'd like to open up the floor now to observer parties, but I will only take interventions from African range states. So I have South Africa.
Thank you, Chair. South Africa would like to thank Botswana for hosting the dialogue meeting of the African Range State. We would like to give special thanks to the chairperson of the Standing Committee for navigating us through a very long and difficult discussions. Chair, we note that the discussions took about 4 days to reach the consensus with the parties there. It was not an easy meeting to come to those conclusions. And an attempt to introduce new text in this platform will not achieve the desired outcomes and will just seek to prolong this process. We have decisions that were accepted by the majority of the range states with consensus, and reopening the discussion and the dialogue here will not achieve consensus because the range states themselves took so long to get to that consensus and make those decisions. So any text amendment will require a lengthy discussion. So we suggest that Benin takes their proposals to the regional engagements that we have planned before the COP, and we currently stick to the decisions that were made, and any other issue with regards to the decisions can be discussed within the planned technical workshop that's going to take place as per decision is currently provided. So we have ample time and opportunity for parties to engage in this process. Unfortunately, I don't believe that we'll be able to reach the consensus today. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, South Africa. I am coming to some thoughts here that I would like to share. I am in agreement with some of the comments that have been made by South Africa that continuing this debate and discussion here will not, it took us 4 days to come to these decisions among 31 African range states, and to try to wordsmith these decisions here I think is problematic. And it is not, they have basically, the Standing Committee doesn't have to submit these decisions. They could be submitted by the African range states. And so, knowing that there is a meeting coming up in March that calls for regional cooperation on proposals going to COP20, I hear what South Africa has said, that perhaps it would be better that the suggestions that were discussed here by Benin and others be given to that meeting for discussion, and that they come forward at that meeting with draft decisions. I know the US has made some suggestions. Hopefully they were noted by some of the African countries. But the spirit of the meeting in Botswana was one of consensus and wanting to pull everyone together. And I feel having this discussion here would be divisive and would hurt the consensus that we had tried to achieve. So this is where the chair is falling out on. I know many parties want to speak, but I think we'll end up with those that support Benin and those that don't. And we basically, as South Africa has so aptly said, have the time here, given our full agenda and other items that affect other range countries, to have that debate now. So I'm looking to the Secretariat to help give me some text that we can take forward and then have the discussion of these decisions in their regional meetings. So give me a few minutes, but I feel this is probably the fairest thing to do here, rather than take up the whole morning discussing this, which I don't think will come to a conclusion, and it will be discussed again at their regional meeting. All right, this is what the chair is going to propose to the standing committee members, and I ask them to pay close attention. So, the standing committee will welcome the outcome of the African Elephant Range State Dialogue meeting as set out in the communique of the meeting and included in Annex 2 to the present document. I heard no dissension on that. I would propose a new paragraph B, which is to invite the African Elephant Range States to consider the draft decisions contained in Annex 1 to the present document and the discussion here at SC 78, and to submit draft decisions for the consideration of the 20th meeting of the Conference of the Parties. Not specifically saying this has to happen in March, but that the African countries, knowing they will have a meeting, basically continue their discussion on this, and that we look to the decisions to come from the African range countries. They can have, there's rooms available here. You can actually start your discussion here by having a regional meeting, and I ask the standing committee reps to help facilitate that. And then C would remain, agree that decision 19.167 has been implemented and can be proposed for deletion. And D, also agree that decision 1.6 can be proposed for deletion at COP20 since the dialogue meeting process will be completed at this time. Oh, 19.168 can be proposed for deletion. My apologies. I really feel this new paragraph B might be the best way forward here, given that I imagine the debate, and based on what the discussions were at the dialogue meeting, it will be divisive, it will have divergent views, and at the end of the day, we won't end up with any draft decisions. So I would like to give the opportunity to the African range states to lead here, and remember the spirit we took to Botswana to work together on this. So that is my plea. Standing committee members, if they can agree with that way forward, or we can continue to have interventions from parties. Thank you. Looking for nods, thumbs up, or in particular, I see the African representatives nodding their heads. I see other standing committee members nodding their heads, so we will go forward with that approach. And I appreciate all the countries who were wanting to speak on this, but I had a feeling of how they would want to speak. And I thank South Africa for their suggestion, which helped the chair come to this conclusion. Thank you. Okay, the remaining item from yesterday afternoon is on basically document 84, taxonomy and nomenclature of African elephants. I will turn to the Secretariat to introduce this document, and then I have some guidance I would like to propose.
Thank you, Chair. I'll keep this very brief. As set out in the document, the Animals Committee has agreed that there are two known species of the African elephant, the savanna elephant Loxodonta africana and the forest elephant Loxodonta cyclotis. In this document, the Secretariat updates its analysis of the impact of recognizing this second African elephant species for resolutions and processes. The Secretariat concludes that the legal impacts would be limited. The conclusion is the same, irrespectively of how this taxonomic change is reflected in the appendices. The Secretariat provides three different options for reflecting the nomenclature change set out in paragraphs 29 to 32 of the document. Kindly note that the revision was issued to correct these cross-references in the recommendation. The Standing Committee is invited to consider the three options, as well as the draft decision and the small amendment contained in the annex to the document, and to submit its recommendations to the Conference of the Parties. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Secretariat. As mentioned by the Secretariat, the Animals Committee has agreed to submit a change to the standard nomenclature reference to the COP to recognize the second species of the African elephant. The Secretariat has helpfully updated its analysis of the potential effects of this recognition and suggested one amendment to Resolution Comp 10.10 and one draft decision. And finally, the Secretariat has identified three options for how to do this non-substantive change. As there is only a relative small number of African elephant range states present at this meeting, and since this issue is important to them as the wildlife managers of this species, I would like to suggest, and this may be radical, that the Standing Committee does not make a recommendation to the COP on the preferred option for reflecting the nomenclature change. I think it is preferable that the conference has all three options available to it to make the decision. My recommendation as chair of the Standing Committee is that the committee submits all three options to the conference. Therefore, I would hope not to open the floor for any views on the three options, because I think we'll have the same debate here, end up with a vote, and then we will go to the COP and those options will reappear and we will have a vote there, and there is probably the appropriate time with 183 parties present. So I look to the Standing Committee in particular. Are they acceptable to this way forward as the chair proposes? That all three options would be basically presented to the COP for discussion there and adoption of one of them. Look to the Standing Committee members for their reaction. I'm seeing some thumbs up, but I'm also seeing some parties want to speak, so I will have some discussion by Standing Committee members. I turn to Georgia.
This is Israel. Georgia is not available. So we understand your sentiment and we can go along with it, though we would have preferred to have an actual recommendation come out of the Standing Committee of one of the three options, and that would be having to do with the recommendation B in terms of the options. So we could live with your recommendation. We would, however, like the Standing Committee to note that this is non-substantial change and therefore a listing proposal would not be necessary to make any of these three changes. And we would support the changes recommended in the to Resolution 1010 that are also in the annex. And just a short note, we would like to thank the nomenclature specialist of the Animal Committee for all his work in looking into this and preparing the background information on this for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Israel. And if I wasn't clear, I was still going to open up discussion on the proposed amendments. What I was looking here suggesting not having a discussion of the three options, but thank you for that clarification. And I think the summary record, if the Standing Committee wants to, if everyone agrees that this is not a non-substantive change, we can note that in our comments. So I turn to back to if any other Standing Committee members wish to speak on this approach, or we're comfortable putting all three options from the Standing Committee forward to the COP. I have Belgium.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We thank the Secretariat for the document and for highlighting again that the practical implications are the same, no matter which option is chosen. And we agree as well that no listing proposal is needed to make any of the three options at the COP. And we agree and thank the Chair for the suggested way forward. Thank you.
of the USA.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On behalf of the North American region, we concur with Israel and Belgium in that any of these options would be non-substantive. And while we prefer options B or C, we can agree with the way forward proposed by the chair. Thank you.
I have Kenya.
Chair, Kenya will support your proposal, although we had already had a preference for option B, just for record purposes. But I think we can also engage further at our consultative meeting that is coming up next month in preparation for discussions in the COP. Thank you, Madam Chair.
That would be helpful, and if any other standing committee member wants to note their preference for either option, that will be in the summary record and can be considered by parties in their decision-making at COP20. So, open to any other standing committee members. So I basically want to conclude then. I haven't heard any other comments on Resolution Comp 10 on the draft amendment or the draft decision. So I think there's support for those going forward, but if, so I will open up discussion on the draft decision or the amendment because I see some parties shaking their head, but at least right now I can conclude that we will send all three options to the COP. So if you have comments on the draft decision or the proposed amendment, I ask you to ask to speak, and I see the U.S.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. With regard to recommendation C, apologies. I would like to say that we do support the recommendation to submit a draft decision and proposed amendments to Resolution Conf 1010, Rev COP 19 on trade in elephant specimens as contained in Annex 1 to the present document, but we would offer one minor edit to the decision, to the draft decision 20AA, paragraph B. We would recommend replacing the words in accordance with the word consistent so that the decision would read, if feasible, carry out the analysis and include the results in its regular report to the Standing Committee, consistent with paragraph 27 of ResConf. That's the only edit. Thank you, Madam Chair.
So I'm looking to any other standing committees members wishing to speak, and in particular, if you're speaking on the draft decision, whether you can accept the edit proposed by the United States. I will also open up the floor to observer parties if they wish to speak to the draft decision or the draft amendment to the resolution. Not seeing any requests, observer organizations. Otherwise, I think I can conclude on this one. Okay, so to conclude, and I look for the standing committee members to agree that the standing committee agrees to this draft decision 20AA with the minor amendment proposed by minor amendment discussed here in plenary, and then the standing committee agrees to the amendments to resolution conf point 1010. I'm seeing nodding heads, so we can conclude this item, and I really appreciate your time on this one. The reason the chair suggested this way forward is we are a half a day behind, and I want to give equal equity to the other remaining agenda items, and I didn't anticipate the outcome. We would reach a decision on the option. So we will move on to the Wednesday morning agenda now, which is 33 Point 13, National Ivory Action Plan process, and I will turn to the Secretariat to introduce the document.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This document provides the Secretariat's assessments of the progress reports of all 13 parties that are currently included in the NIAP process and its recommendations for each of them based on the assessments, which include the exit from the NIAP process for 2 parties and the written warnings for 3 others due to the lack of progress made. The Secretary would like to stress that its recommendation to urge all parties that remain in the NIAP process after SC 78 to step up efforts to achieve their NIAP goals by SC 81 would mean that these parties are expected to achieve 80% of their NIAP goals according to the NIAP guidelines, noting that most of these NIAPs have been designed for a duration of 2 years, and all but one should have achieved several years ago, sometimes by 9 years. The Standing Committee is invited to review and agree to the recommendations. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So, in opening this document, basically what I would ask you to consider, I'm not doing these each one by one, but the decisions before us where I'm looking for discussion is, do you agree that Malaysia and Cambodia can exit the NIAP process, paragraph 24G and I, and we take note of the progress made in the DRC, Vietnam, Gabon, Mozambique, Angola, Cameroon, Laos, PDR, Nigeria, or Niger? Nigeria. And then we basically also will issue, Standing Committees to consider issuing a written warning based on the progress not made in Togo, Congo, and Qatar. So I open the floor for discussion by Standing Committee members, and if you could speak to sort of to those particular 3 items I identified. I have Belgium.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We agree to Malaysia and Cambodia to exit the NIAP, and we congratulate them for all the work they've done. We can also agree to the recommendations in relation to DRC, Nigeria, Vietnam, Gabon, Mozambique, Angola, Cameroon, and Laos PDR. For Togo, Congo, and Qatar, as such, we also agree to the recommendations, but we would like to add a line or a recommendation asking them to really enhance their efforts towards the implementation of their actions between this meeting and SC 81. And if by SC 81 there is no demonstrable progress with the implementation, we request the Standing Committee to issue a recommendation to suspend all commercial trade in CITES listed species. So we agree that there's a written caution already now, but we like to have this additional recommendation to make sure it is well understood that progress needs to be made and that otherwise there will be consequences decided upon at SC 81. Thank you.
Thank you, Belgium. That was clear. So I ask you to react also to Belgium's additional amendment recommendation to that. So any other Standing Committee members? I have Kenya.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, Kenya will agree to the proposed removal of the parties that have met the compliance levels. Madam Chair, in addition, we will suggest directing the Secretariat to continue its work to make further proposed amendments to the NIAP guidelines based on the review and report to COP20. making a reference to the guidelines in SC 78.33.13.2. We believe more findings from the review need to be considered.
Apologies, Kenya. I've only opened up 13.1 right now, so if you can keep that comment for 13.2, we'll get there.
All right, thank you.
I have the DRC.
Merci. Thank you, Madam Chair. Speaking for the Central African Group, we have taken note of the situation with respect to Côte d'Ivoire and would like to thank the Secretariat for having prepared these documents. We would agree with the measures proposed, and we think that suspending all CITES trade should not be considered, as we have other measures available to us, including written cautions. So we do think that we should think of other measures, and we would also agree with what is proposed in paragraph 29. As a result, as Central Africa, we would like to recall that we do have a process available to improve the implementation of the convention by decreasing ivory trafficking with a series of different measures. It is a matter of ensuring that rules are scrupulously respected when it comes to the implementation of the convention. Thank you.
Thank you, DRC, and I would like to clarify that right now what we are looking at as a recommendation is a warning letter going to Togo, Congo, and Qatar. Belgium has suggested additional language that would basically encourage them that they should enhance their measures between now and SC 81 to avoid any consequences. That consequence could be a trade suspension, it could be other things. So we're not discussing here any trade suspensions. It's just their language wants to add a recommendation to sort of entice them to really make progress in the intervening period. So I have Kuwait.
Thank you, Chair. We are aligned with the recommendation made by the Secretariat, but we disagree with the recommendation made by Belgium. Maybe we can have a better language to address the inadequacy of the reporting, such as providing assistance from the CITES Secretariat, providing technical, like something else other than putting the words of trade suspension for all commercial trade. So we will not agree on the addition made by the Belgium.
Thank you. All right, I will now open up the floor to observer parties, and I have Gabon.
Merci. Thank you, Madam Chair. Gabon supports the recommendations in the document, and we would not like them to be in any way amended. We are opposed, in other words, to the Belgian proposal. We do have Resolution Conf 14.3, which clearly lays down the process to be followed when it comes to actually warning or sanctioning countries when it comes to their NEAPs. We already have clear guidance laid down, so there is no need to in any way amend these recommendations. We think that they should be adopted as the document currently stands. Thank you, Madam.
Thank you. I give the floor to Qatar.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for giving me the floor. First of all, Qatar ensured its strong commitment to CITES and its obligation under the Convention. Regarding the recommendation in the documents, we agree on it, and Qatar will give you further details on the National Ivory Action Plan and the progress report. Regarding the recommendation from Belgium, we are disagree on it. Thank you.
I have Nigeria, and I'm going to ask parties to start to be brief, to say where they are. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Nigeria has noted the recommendations of the Standing Committee of Partial Progress in line with Step 4, Paragraph E of the guidelines, and we will make progress for submission before COP20. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Nigeria. Senegal?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senegal has taken note of the headway made by the Secretariat on this matter. We don't wish to repeat what Gabon has already said, but we do have reservations with respect to parties being encouraged to accomplish their goals before SC 81. That seems unrealistic. Some countries will have met 50% of their goals by SC 78. Thank you.
Thank you. Malaysia?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Malaysia appreciates the recommendation by the Secretary for Malaysia to exit the NIAP process and also appreciates Kuwait's comments. We would like to take this opportunity to thank the Secretariat, parties and organizations for the support rendered to ensure the successful implementation of NIAP actions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Cambodia?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Cambodia would like to express gratitude to the Standing Committee to recommend for Cambodia to exit the NIAP process, and Cambodia continue to implement the remaining activity in the NIAP action plan to complete that as soon as possible. And also we would like to thank to the consortium of the ICCWC to support Cambodia to achieve such results. Thank you.
Thank you. I have other parties wishing to speak, but I now have some Standing Committee members. So I will turn to the USA.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Speaking as the United States would like to applaud all the NIAP parties for their timely submission of their progress reports for this meeting. And the United States supports the recommendations as outlined in the documents.
Thank you. I have Belgium.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Apologies if perhaps my intervention wasn't clear enough, although I think your recap of it was exactly on point. So just to make sure that everyone understands what we are asking, we are in agreement with the recommendations as suggested by the Secretariat, so for Togo, Congo and Qatar, to issue a written caution. The addition that we would like to see is completely in line with resolution 14.3, which gives like a stepwise approach when parties are not in compliance, and to make it clear that if there is again not no substantial progress by SC 81, that then a trade suspension should be considered. I also want to note that Togo is a Category A party under the NIAP process and only has 14% of its actions achieved, which is the lowest among all parties, and they did not give any explanation for the lack in progress. Congo did not report in time for SC 77 and was then requested to submit their report, and if deemed insufficient, a trade suspension should follow. A report was submitted then, but now, but with almost no progress. Qatar did submit a progress report, but it did not provide any information indicating progress. And Qatar was already warned by the Secretariat about potential measures in case of a substandard progress report. So I think for all three parties, this is not the first time that they have been warned. They are warned again. So I think it is only appropriate and in line with Resolution 14.3 that it is made clear that consequences will follow if by SC 81 there's insufficient progress. Thank you.
I give the floor to the DRC and then I will pause.
Merci, Madame.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm speaking, first of all, as a representative of the DRC. I would like to thank the Secretariat for the support they have provided to us in order to make the progress that we have outlined in our report. And we would welcome continued support from the Secretariat in order to further improve our situation. Madam Chair, I would like once again to stress one matter. The progress made, and I'm speaking now as representative of the Central African region, I would like to stress that the NIAP process is a quite demanding one, and it would be good if the Standing Committee could find ways of commending those countries which have made some headway with respect to their NIAP progress. They are range states and do need to have mechanisms in place that would stimulate, fund, or support the efforts to be made with respect to coordination. Coordination, after all, is what it is about. We need to have all state services working on these issues, working in harmony, and we need to find ways of ensuring that we can all work together. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, DRC. I've consulted with the Secretariat and I'm not hearing support for Belgium's amendment. So this is what I'm going to suggest, and maybe this will satisfy Belgium. As the conclusions, based on the above considerations and assessments of the progress report submitted for consideration at the present meeting, the Standing Committee agrees to A, urge all parties included in the NIAP process to step up efforts as a matter of urgency to achieve their NIAP goals by the next regular meeting of the Standing Committee, in line with Step 4, Paragraph E of the guidelines and Resolution Comp 14.3. Sorry, I read my 7 as a 3. And B, agree to consider application of appropriate measures in accordance with Step 4, Paragraph F of the guidelines on parties in Category A and B that remain in these categories after SC 78 and fail to achieve their NIAP goals by the next regular meeting of the Standing Committee unless otherwise well justified. I've been consulting with the Secretariat. They says if we cite the resolution makes it clear, and the guidelines what step if these countries fail to respond by next SC 81. So I understand your addition would make it clearer of the consequences, but hopefully maybe working with the Asian representative, as Kuwait has suggested, they can be aware of what the next steps are and that there is in the process how it works and what could befall them at SC 81 if they fail to make progress. Is that a way forward acceptable to the Standing Committee? I see nodding heads, and thank you, Oh, and also, if I always forget one, the Standing Committee agrees on the following recommendations with respect to each individual party that is included in the NIAP process grouped by categories, which are the countries. I heard no objections to the suggestions. So basically, we had said that Malaysia and Cambodia can exit, and we note the progress made in the DRC, Nigeria, Vietnam, Gabon, Mozambique, Angola, Cameroon, Lao PDR, and that warning letters will be issued to Togo, Congo, and Qatar. So that is the way forward. And I'm looking for thumbs up or nodding heads, and I appreciate Kuwait's suggestion of working within the region to help them understand the process, and hopefully we will have progress at the next meeting. Thank you. So now we move on to document 3313.2, the review of the National Ivory Action Plan process, decisions 19.68 and 19.7, and I turn to the Secretariat to introduce the document.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This document presents the findings of the review on the NIAP process undertaken through a consultancy as requested by Decision 1968 and the considerations of the Secretariat on the ways to accommodate the recommendations, including through the proposed amendments to the guidelines to the NIAP process as contained in Annex 3 of Resolution COP 1010. The Standing Committee is invited to review the proposed amendments to the guidelines and submit them for consideration at COP20. Thank you, Chair.
So I open the discussion from the Standing Committee, particular to the recommendations in paragraph 26. I have Kenya.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The NIAP review was agreed at COP19 to ensure the NIAP process is fit for purpose. Kenya welcomes the effort of the Secretariat in making some proposed amendments to the NIAP guidelines in SC 78 Doc 3313-2. Kenya believes more findings from the review needs to be considered and would suggest directing the Secretariat to continue its work to make further proposed amendments to the NIAP guidelines based on the review and to report to COP20. Thank you, Chair.
I will open up to observer parties. Oh, I have Belgium.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We agree with the suggested changes in the NIAP guidelines as presented in Annex 1 of the document, but like the colleague from Kenya, we feel that there are many outstanding recommendations coming out of the review, and we feel that the work isn't completely done. So we would align ourselves with the request from Kenya that the work be continued, either by renewing the existing decisions or by drafting new decisions requesting to work on the additional recommendations for updating the NIAP process, focusing also on the long-term recommendations for consideration of COP21. Thank you.
I have Japan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Japan would like to suggest one minor amendment. Regarding the amendment to the 5 pillars of NIAP, Step 2A2, in the guidelines of Annex 3 of Resolution 10.10, revision of COP19, the Secretariat proposal, Part 25 on page 7, and the actual proposed amendment, Annex 1, Part 4 on page 9, are different. Where the amendment is missing the description for illegal wildlife products, The restrictions should be made consistent. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I now open the floor to observer parties. I open the floor to observer organizations. I've got, okay. I will give the floor to the forensic science. It's abbreviated on my screen, but hopefully you know who you are. The forensic scientists, maybe? Center for Environmental Forensic Sciences. Oh, I also have a party wishing to speak, so I'll turn to the U.S. first, and then I'll give the floor to the NGOs.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just very quickly, we'd like to align ourselves with the comments and the recommendations made by Belgium.
Thank you. Okay, so it is the Center for Environmental Forensic Science.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This intervention was originally for 33.13.1, but you did not ask for organization, so I hope it's okay to read it now because it still refers to NEAPs in general.
Sorry, I've closed that discussion, but I guess if you can do it in a minute, I will allow it for the record.
Thank you. This intervention is on behalf of the Center for Environmental Forensic Science and 9 other organizations whose names have been submitted to the Secretariat. Vietnam has made more seizures than any other country over the past decade, and we commend them for their effort and for their work to tackle illegal wildlife trade within its borders. However, given the high percentage of Vietnam ivory seizures relative to other countries shipped from all parts of Africa, the lack of follow-up investigation of these shipments by Vietnam is limiting their ability and the ability of the international counterparts to curb future illegal trade. This is contributing to a paucity of information that constrains our overall understanding of the transnational illegal ivory trade. We recommend that Vietnam facilitate follow-up DNA analyses of their seizures to determine the origins of this exceptional volume of ivory and the number and identities of the traffickers involved. Such information would greatly benefit law enforcement efforts in Vietnam, the countries from whence the ivory is poached and exported, and the transit countries subjected to these shipments. In addition, information provided by most NEAP parties highlights that limited progress is being made to conduct transnational cooperation on ivory trafficking investigations and prosecutions. This is a major concern and an obstacle to disrupting
Can I ask you to please wrap up? The light is blinking at me.
We therefore call on NEAP parties to increase reporting on actions under the NEAP's Pillar 3 concerning regional and international cooperation. Thank you very much.
I call on EIA UK.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This intervention is made on behalf of EIA and 7 other organisations. We thank both the consultants for conducting the review and the Secretariat for their efforts on this topic. We also welcome and support the interventions by Kenya, US, Belgium, and those calling for the renewal of the decisions and further work on this issue. The review concludes that a number of changes to the NIAP guidelines contained in Annex 3 are integral to provide clarity for parties in the process and to enhance the results and outcomes of respective countries' NIAPs. However, we are concerned that the recommendations of the Secretariat in Doc 33.13.2 do not take account of many of the significant recommendations put forward by the review. This is a missed opportunity to strengthen the process. We believe the Standing Committee should take into account the review's recommendations in full in considering implementing Decision 19.70, and we therefore support the interventions made prior to this one by Kenya, the US, and Belgium. The NIAP process is a very important elephant conservation tool and framework, and it's incumbent on the Standing Committee now to ensure that we take full advantage of the process. Thank you.
Thank you. Give me a minute to pause and I'll conclude this. So A is okay. Okay, thank you. So this is my conclusion based on the discussion we have had, that the Standing Committee agrees to little paragraph A in the recommendations. We would take note of document SC 78, document 3313.2 in the review of the National Ivory Action Plan process in CITES in Annexes 2 and 3, to document SC 78, document 33.13.2, and the progress made in implementing decision 19.68. We agree to paragraph B, we have reviewed the draft amendments to Annex 3 in Resolution Conf 10 on the trade in elephant specimens contained in Annex 1 to document SC 78, document 33.13.2, and will submit them for consideration by the Conference of the Parties at the 20th meeting. And to Japan's point, the Secretariat has told me they will make Annex 3 and 4 consistent. So thank you. And then finally, we agree that decisions we are going to propose a new decision in C, so that we can agree that the decisions 19.68 and 19.7 have been implemented and can be deleted, but we propose a new decision. And the new decision would read, the Standing Committee, with the support of the Secretariat, shall consider further the long-term considerations in the review of the NIAP process contained in Annex 3 of document SC 78, document 3313.2, and submit any recommendations for consideration at COP21, including, if appropriate, further amendments to the guidelines. So this gets to the issues raised by Kenya, Belgium, that the work would continue, but it would continue under a new decision, and we would not renew the old decisions, but rather delete them. So this is my summary of the discussion, and I look to the Standing Committee members if they can agree with this way forward. I see nodding heads, so we can conclude this agenda item. Thank you. And we are now on agenda item 48 and 49, non-judgment findings for specimens of Appendix 2 species taken from areas beyond national jurisdiction, decision 19.138, and introduction of the C. So I will first call on the Animals Committee Chair to introduce document 48. Thank you. I call on Switzerland.
Thank you, Chair. At COP19, parties adopted a set of decisions with the aim to analyze the way parties are making NDFs for Appendix 2 species in ABNJ, and to analyze how parties can best be supported in the making of such NDFs. To achieve this, a technical workshop was convened which brought together parties, worldwide experts, and members of the CITES Animals Committee to discuss lessons learned, identify challenges, and make recommendations to the AC and SC. The Secretariat organized a technical workshop from 25th to 26th April 2024 in Geneva, thanks to the generous contribution of the EU and the UK. The results of this workshop were presented to AC33, which agreed to submit the resulting recommendations to SC78, found in paragraph of this document, as well as several implementation issues in paragraph 8. In document SC 78, Doc 49 on the introduction from the C, the Secretariat invites the Standing Committee to consider draft decisions on introduction from the C. The draft decision in the annex to that document include a decision to prepare a revision of Resolution 14.6, Rev COP 16 on introduction from the sea, with the aim to provide clarification where required, as well as to integrate, as appropriate, additional elements, including the implementation challenges highlighted in paragraph 8 of this document here. So, therefore, the Standing Committee is invited to take note of the report of the Animals Committee, including the recommendations in paragraph 7, and B, agreed that the draft decisions on introduction from the C in the annex to document SC 7849 will allow the Standing Committee to address the relevant implementation matters raised at the technical workshop on ABNG. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I will now turn to the Secretariat to introduce document 49. I will treat document 48 and 49 consecutively, so we'll have discussion on both documents at the same time. So I'd like to get document 49 introduced by the Secretariat. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The document summarizes the progress on the implementation of COP decisions on introduction from the sea. The Secretariat has updated its analysis on the links with the agreement on the conservation and sustainable use of marine biological diversity in areas beyond national jurisdiction, the BBNJ agreement, and reports on other activities relevant to IFS. The Secretariat proposes revisions to Resolution CONF 14.6, Rev COP 16 on IFS during the next intersessional period to clarify existing provisions and integrate additional elements. The document outlines possible elements to be considered. The Standing Committee is invited to note the Secretariat's report and review 2 new draft decisions for submission to COP20 contained in annex of the document, including on the preparation of a revision of the resolution with the aim to focus primarily on the annex to the resolution. Thank you.
So with the introductions, I now open the discussion to the recommendations in paragraph 10 of document 48 and the recommendations in paragraph 24 of document 49. So I turn to the Standing Committee members, and I have New Zealand.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to thank Animals Committee and the Secretariat for submitting these reports, and particularly identifying the 11 key recommendations and 10 implementation challenges noted in paragraphs 7 and 8 of Doc 48 that came from that excellent technical workshop organised by the Secretariat with financial support from the EU and the UK. The implementation challenges noted in paragraph 8 have already been picked up in draft decision 20BB Roman 2 in Doc 49, but I feel that there's a danger that the 11 recommendations in paragraph 7 will be lost if they're simply noted as proposed in paragraph 10A of Doc 48. So our suggestion is that when the Standing Committee prepares the revision of Resolution CONF 14.6, as envisaged in the draft decision 20BBA of Doc 49, that it is amended to include consideration, point 22 of Doc 49 is amended to include consideration of the 11 recommendations contained in paragraph 7 of this current document, which is 48. All a bit confusing, sorry. But it's just that there are some really valuable points in those recommendations that I fear will be lost unless there's a direction to consider them in the drafting of the new resolution. Thank you.
So if I understand your correction, it's basically to the decision 20BB, little I, that not just citing the document, but actually specifically pointing to paragraph 7. If we make that change there, that would probably accommodate your concern.
Yes, I'm suggesting the insertion of the words responses to the recommendations be inserted ahead of responses to implementation challenges in little I in Doc 49 2B, I think it is.
Thank you. We've got that noted now. Okay, I have Japan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Japan thinks that we had a very practical discussion on the NDF for specimens of Appendix 2 species taken from the area beyond the national jurisdiction during the workshop held in Geneva in May 2024. Japan generally supports the recommendations mentioned in the paragraph 10 of document 48 and paragraph 24 in the document 49 with a slight modification made by New Zealand. Thank you.
Thank you. I have the UK.
Thank you, Chair. The UK notes the report of the Animals Committee, including the recommendations in paragraph 7, and we support the intervention of New Zealand to ensure that these are not lost. We thank the Secretariat for convening the workshop in April 2024, at which valuable and important discussions took place, although of course many and varied challenges persist. As such, we agreed to the draft decisions on introduction from the sea in Annex to SE 78 Doc 49 to allow the Standing Committee to address the relevant implementation matters raised at the workshop. Regarding document 49, the UK agrees with the Secretariat's conclusion that there is some ambiguity among parties on the interpretation of introduction from the sea and its application, and we support the submission of the draft decisions in the annex of this document. That's document 49 to COP20. Additionally, we agree that decisions 19, 140 and 141 have been implemented and proposed for deletion. Thank you.
Thank you. I will now open the floor to observer parties, and I have Mozambique.
Good morning. Mozambique agree to have NDF from introduction from the sea, ABNJ, and in fact, there are quite a number of species that we don't have an NDF for. So we also, on the line with document 48, we also agree the suggestion for having NDF for the stocks. Thank you.
Thank you. I have the U.S.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Speaking as the United States is under a new administration. We are not able to take a position on the matters in SC 78 Doc 48 or 49 at this time. This is without prejudice to our ability to express positions on this matter in the future. Thank you, and we'd like the comment noted for the record.
Thank you. Argentina.
Gracias.
Thank you. On document 49, I observe that some of the considerations under paragraph 5, for example, F and H, are interpretations of the agreement of the ABNJ agreement that seem to go beyond the scope and mandate of the Secretariat in decision 140. We also consider that it should be taken slowly, the decision on the agreements of the BBNJ agreement and CITES, in particular that it has not yet entered into force and that there are still meetings of the preparatory committee to be held where the modalities of implementation are to be decided. Thank you.
Thank you. I call on the EU.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In relation to document SC 78 and 49, the European Union and its member states agree with recommendations A, B, and C. We welcome the reflections regarding recent work on aquatic species and NDF for marine species taken in areas beyond national jurisdiction. In our view, further practical guidance on the implementation of Resolution 14.6 on introduction from the sea would be very useful. Regarding recommendation D, We support the draft decisions prepared by the Secretariat, with one exception. In relation to Decision 20BB.2, so Little Roman 2, in our view, recommendation in point 8J in document SC 7848 does not respond to implementation challenges. Therefore, we suggest limiting the mandate in draft decision 20BB.2 to paragraph 8 points A to I of document SC 7848. Consequently, we propose to add at the end of decision 20BB.2 the following words: paragraph 8 A to I. Finally, we agree to the proposed deletion of decisions 19, 140 and 141, recommendation E. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I call on the Russian Federation.
Thank you, Madam. The Russian Federation thanks the Animals Committee for the document. We would like to make a comment regarding the recommendation in paragraph 7 on the concept of international scientific authorities. There is no definition of what international scientific authorities are. We understand that they are deliberately made flexible in the document. However, in this respect, it is unclear how such bodies function, how they interact with the scientific bodies of parties. We believe that this needs to be clarified, since potentially it would lead to unclarity about the decision-making mechanisms and legality of such international scientific authorities. We also thank the Secretariat for the document referring to 49 and for studying the synergies between the CITES and the BBNJ agreement. We support the statement just made by Argentina. The final decision on the way forward with this matter is up to the parties. We would like to point out potential problems with introduction of the BBNJ agreement into the process under the CITES, since not all parties to the convention are parties to the agreement. In this respect, we would like to suggest the following amendments to the recommendations part. In paragraph 24, we would add a subpara after subpara B, and our subpara would read, takes into account that not all parties to the convention are parties to the agreement. Full stop. In the annex, we would like to delete bullet I, so that's little I, under 20BB. That reads, reflection of the agreement under the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea on the conservation and sustainable use of marine biological diversity of areas beyond national jurisdiction.
Can I ask you to please wrap up? We're out of time. We're also approaching the lunch break, and I'm asking the interpreter for 5 more minutes.
Thank you, Madam. I'm concluding my statement. The decision whether to include particular provisions in resolutions are subject for discussions among all parties at the COP, and we should not prejudge these outcomes. I thank you.
The interpreters are fine with extra time.
I now have many parties asking to speak on this one. I think we've heard quite a lot. I'll turn to New Zealand because they're the Standing Committee member, and then I will see if we can perhaps conclude this without further interventions. But I turn to New Zealand.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, sorry, I forgot to raise this earlier, is that once these decisions have been made, I consider that decisions 19.135 through to 19.139 will have been implemented and can be proposed for deletion. I don't think that was in the original documents.
Okay, I would like to give the floor to non-party observer organizations, only because I've got FAO asking to speak, so I'll have, they're an important stakeholder in this. I'll talk to FAO, give the floor to FAO.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As FAO has been part of the process relating to the interpretation and implementation of Resolution Conf 14.6 Rev COP 16 on introduction from the sea, we look forward to continuing supporting the parties and the Secretariat in the potential review of this resolution. We take this opportunity to highlight the need to make synergies as appropriate between CITES and the Agreement on Port States Measures to Prevent, Deter, and Eliminate Illegal, Unreported, and Unregulated Fishing, PSMA, as Annex B of the PSMA explicitly refers to CITES. Other FAO technical instruments and guidance, including the voluntary guidelines for transshipments and on-catch documentation scheme, should also be considered in the review of this resolution. We stand ready to support parties by providing relevant additional information on these particular instruments, which can help the parties to reach a common understanding on the interpretation and application of provisions relevant to the introduction from the sea. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I have several parties wishing to speak. I will take one more. I call on Panama.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. We will be very brief, and we join with the statement made by the European Union as they have said what we were thinking. Thank you.
Thank you. I will need a minute to pause with the Secretariat. Several changes have been suggested, so I want to see where we all fall out. Thank you. All right, what the chair would like to do is I will allow the two parties who are still asking the floor to speak, Ecuador and Senegal, and then we will adjourn for lunch, and it will give me time to put this all together, hopefully. So, Ecuador.
Muchas gracias. Thank you, Madam Chair. Ecuador would like to thank the Secretary for organizing last year's workshop and for preparing these documents. We would also like to say that we support New Zealand and their proposals with respect to the text. Thank you.
And then finally, Senegal.
Merci, Madame.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We will be brief, Madam. The position of Senegal has already been very ably put by the EU and Panama, and we support those two parties. Thank you, Madam.
So then I will turn to the Secretariat for housekeeping announcements before we break for lunch, and please pay close attention because there are several working and drafting groups meeting at lunchtime. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. First, I would like to repeat the national annual siren test that will take place. Looking further at the website, it says that the general alert signal will be sounded at 1:30 p.m. today throughout Switzerland. And this is, it will be a regular ascending and descending tone, so please don't be alarmed, for about 1 minute. And it'll be repeated once after a 2-minute interval. So you'll hear 2 sirens between 1:30 and 2 p.m. There may be a bit more between 2 p.m. and 4:30 p.m., but this is a siren test, so please don't be alarmed. As for the meetings of the working group and subgroups taking place, there's the MIC and ETIS subgroup in room 11, floor 2. Working group on application of Article 13 in Lao PDR, room 9. Drafting group on agenda item 33.1, Oceanic White-Tipped Shark, in room 15, which is in floor 3. And the Finance and Budget Subcommittee, which will take place in room 12. Thank you, Chair.
And with that, we adjourn for lunch.